I'm Tal Ater, and you're listening to The Changelog.
Welcome back, everyone. This is The Changelog, and I'm your host, Adam Stacoviak. This is episode 183, and on today's show, Jared and I are joined by Tal Ater. We talked about speech recognition, and specifically his project called Annyang. So if you heard that name before, and you listened to Arrested Development, or you watched that show, you know what I'm talking about. We also talked about Offline First and his project UpUp, and we also talked about promoting open source. We had 4 awesome sponsors: CodeShip, TopTal, Braintree, and also Opbeat. Our first sponsor for today's show is CodeShip. If you haven't checked out the blog from CodeShip, go check it out, blog.codeship.com. And there was a recent post I want to mention from Barry Jones titled Why Docker? And he dives deep into why Docker became a household name, why Docker instead of VMs. He even goes into how Docker enables consistent environments, and even the fact that Docker isn't going away. He makes that hypothesis that it's not going away. There's also an ebook mentioned in that article. It's free. It's from CodeShip. Super awesome ebook. It's titled Why Containers and Docker Are the Future. This book is awesome. Go check it out. The link is in the article, and I'm going to put a link to the article in the show notes. So check out the show notes, and now on to the show. All right, we're back, and we got a fun show lined up today. I got an American accent, so I'm not going to say his name right, but the American way is Tal Ater. Great open sourcer. Maybe a little mention to the end of the show, but Jared, this show has been teed up for a bit now. Can you talk a bit about the plans for getting Tal on the show?
Yeah, well, Tal, I think we first met you around your open source library Annyang, which was a couple of years ago. Recently, you released UpUp, which made a decent splash. And in the conversations around those two things, you mentioned that you got married, quit your job on a 6-month honeymoon, or traveling the world and working on open source.
Wow, that's the dream right there.
This guy's living the dream. Let's get him on the show.
That's right. Well, welcome to the show, Tom.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So, yeah, actually, you said the name perfectly, Tal Ater. So, yeah, I've been... so just to start, if anyone is worried about the accent here, it's me, not you guys. Like, I've been practicing for 2 weeks how to say the name of my own library. Like, UpUp, am I saying, is it an application? Is it up? Like, I don't even know how to say it. So you guys are good.
Maybe give us your roots, where you're from, and how'd you get into this whole gig? So
I'm a developer from Tel Aviv, Israel, as you can hear. Developer, I've been a product guy, entrepreneur, maker, creator, all those stuff. And yeah, as you said, like the slogan I like to attach to myself is I quit my job for open source. So
you don't hear that every day.
So you can also add crazy to the list based on that.
Well, the question is, you're newly married, so does your wife think you're crazy?
Yeah, so I guess we're going to have to talk about sustainability in open source at some point. A little bit of spoiler. But yeah, I'm still figuring that out. But still took the jump and the plunge into it, and let's see how it plays.
So before you were doing open source, you're a developer and a product guy. Do you have a long history of working in the industry, writing code? What have you been up to before you quit your job for open source?
So basically, I've been doing this all my life. I mean, at around the age of 7, my dad got me a Sinclair Spectrum ZX, if you guys remember that one. It was basically just a keyboard that you connected to a tape recorder, which connected to your screen. And you could program BASIC on that little thing. And I didn't even know the English alphabet at that point, and I was already learning how to program. I would go learn at a class, come home, and my dad would teach me the ABC. So it was a bit of a slow start, but I've been doing that ever since. I mean, in high school, and the minute I finished high school, went right into it, after the army, of course, during the army even, and I've been building websites since '96, so it's almost 20 years now.
Well, that's a thing in Israel where you have to serve in the military, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a friend from back in the day. His name was Dion. Probably similar, where I pronounced his name incorrectly, or with my English American accent. But he was like, he lived here in the States, and then he had to go back home because he was studying here. He had to go back home and serve in the military for a couple of years. I was like, oh, that's crazy. So they force you. What's like it's not. I shouldn't say forced. You have to. It's maybe that is forced. I don't know. What can you say?
I mean, you have to, but anyone who wants to get out of it can. It's like
there
getting...
are ways.
Yeah, there are ways.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I mean, that didn't stop me from like continuing to read up, and like I would walk around with I would print out programming books and little pieces of paper and put them in my uniform and read them whenever I could.
Wow.
Like I took every minute I could.
So you put guard duty to its truest form there. You were guarding and learning.
Yeah. So yeah,
That's awesome.
I actually did that while on guard duty.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically 20 years, which makes me sound really old. I'm 35 now. And so basically my entire life since high school.
It's interesting to hear that perspective, that you're, that it was so important to you that you would go to any length, it seems like, even printing out a programming book and kind of putting it in your shirt pocket, your uniform to find a way because of this passion.
Yeah, I find myself to be extremely lucky to still be so passionate about what I'm doing, and love it so much. And if anything, it grows with time. Like I still love it as much. It's so much fun. And there's so much happening right now with web development and JavaScript, and everything is changing so fast, and new things are coming out. So it's just exciting all the time.
I got to ask you, just because you mentioned it, but the programming book, can you recall what you may have been studying then? Like what languages, what paradigms, what in particular?
So this is probably Perl or ASP Classic. I do have an image of myself after the army sitting on a beach in Sinai in Egypt, sitting there, my legs in the water, reading Ruby on Rails.
Nice.
Yeah,
wow.
That was like 2001. Yeah,
I want to see that picture. Please share it.
I wish I had it. Like everyone around me was relaxing and smoking and relaxing, and I was like reading about Ruby on Rails, which was like the new hotness back then.
Oh, it's how you relax.
Yeah, exactly. It's less stressful.
That's one thing about the software industry that I love is, a lot of people spend a lot of time finding what they're passionate about, what really, floats their boat, so to speak. And oftentimes once you find it, it's contrary to making a living. Like I love, if you love music, like it's very difficult to make a living doing music because so many people are trying that. If you love to paint, like it's not the easiest way to make a living, but if you love to write software, you've fallen in love with something that you can do not just for fun, but you can do, very lucratively as a vocation as well. So we're pretty fortunate that way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I found. Like, I love doing this so much. I mean, like, this is a bit embarrassing, but I've literally found myself jumping out and dancing alone in the room when I had pull requests accepted to open source libraries. So when you're this passionate and this excited about open source, quitting my job and focusing full time on open source suddenly makes sense to me, if not to my wife.
I think that's a case where we need pics or it didn't happen. You can use the new iOS live photos the next time you get a PR. There's that project that'll take a picture of you each time your your push doesn't happen or you have a merge conflict. I can't remember which one it is, but you should get a live shot every time you get a pull request.
I haven't heard that one. Like, it sounds amazing, especially for SVN, whoever is still using those.
Yeah. Well, speaking of interesting and somewhat amazing open source projects, you have a couple of them under your belt. And the first one that seemed to take everybody by surprise and was a big hit back in 2013, I think, was when it first came out, September time. I remember you emailing us about it. is called annyang, which is speech recognition that just works. That's your little tagline there, and it's allows you to control a website by your voice. Can you give us the background on that project?
Okay, so I think the background behind this is pretty much the story behind every project I do. There's like so many exciting new technologies coming out and new things in browsers every day. And sometimes, you gotta read through long specs and understand everything and the differences between different browsers and all those little things. So what I like to do is I like to call it I read the specs so you don't have to. So with annyang, what I did was this new technology of speech recognition came out, and it's such a part of our lives by now. I mean, I was talking just today. I spoke to my phone, asked him question a few times already, but you don't really see that on the web yet. So what I set out to do was to take that and make it super easy for anyone to use. So you don't have to understand like all the different settings for WebKit speech recognition, as it is called, and understand the difference between browsers and HTTP and HTTPS and all those things. You just say, okay, annyang, if the user says, show me search phrase, then run this function and pass it that search phrase. If it says do that, then do that. And then you just say annyang start and it takes care of everything. So basically, I'm taking a technology that is very powerful and has a lot of features and build a very opinionated library that does one thing and does it well and super easy. So that's what annyang does. I mean, if you want to add if you can basically change the UI of your site. So if you're apple.com, for example, which is an awful example because it doesn't work on Safari, like most things these days, but if you're on apple.com and there's a limited number of links, if you're looking for a monitor, you have to click through a few different pages before you find it. And if you're looking for store locations, whatever, there's a limited amount of screen space. But if you open up, in a way, it's another dimension. If you open it up to speech, like show me screens or show me monitors or show me HD monitors, whatever the user thinks he wants, the site can respond to that. So that's what I did, and that was the use case I had in mind. But of course, once you release something, that's the most exciting thing about open source. Once you release it, like people go crazy with it if you're lucky.
It takes a life of its own, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people use annyang to create remote control cars that you can tell them to go left, go right, reverse, etc. I've seen people in a hackathon in Bangladesh, I think it was, that they built AR drones, those little flying drones, and you could tell them to dance or spin or do different things, and they built that with annyang.
Very cool.
Yeah, actually, just 2 weeks ago, I saw a developer who built a bathroom mirror that he can talk to. So he's standing in front of his bathroom mirror, shaving or whatever, and he can actually ask it for stock quotes or ask the mirror about the weather. And he built it with a two-way mirror that has a tablet behind it that shows everything, and it looks super polished.
What?
Yeah, it looks like...
That's amazing.
It looks like an Apple product from 2022. Like it's so polished and so amazing. So doing things like that is really exciting, seeing what people are building, like taking these new technologies and making them more accessible. That's really fun.
Yeah, so in those different use cases, specifically, the bots and whatnot, are those all running embedded web browsers, or is annyang able to be used in a server-side context or in like a node environment as well? How is that working?
With a browser. It's still hard to run it on Node.
Very cool. Yeah, I think that is one of the most exciting things about open source is, once you put it out there, especially something like this, which has, a specific use case in mind, but then it is just generally interesting to dink around with. People tend to start using it in ways that that you couldn't imagine. Going back to your point about the third dimension or the additional dimension that you're adding, one problem that I find with audio interfaces into websites, for instance, or even on the phone, is that discoverability is really an issue. I don't know what I can and cannot say to this interface. Have you put any thought into that with regard to annyang?
No, so I guess that is a bigger problem, and that is something that I still run into with my Google phone. Like just yesterday, I was telling him, "Okay, Google," and he was like, "Please retrain voice model." So I said, "Okay, Google, retrain voice model," and like he asked me to retrain, and I said it back, and it didn't understand. So it requires like like machine
the
learning.
The words I've said to Siri is crazy. Siri upsets me on a daily basis, and I give her a chance, and I really want her to work better. And I'm like, no. I think I was looking for something the other day. I was looking up a word in the Greek library or the Greek language, and I was trying to Google for it, and it just kept pulling back the Wikipedia page for Greek, what Greek means or what Greek is, and it like omitted everything after that. There's so many times I'm like upset with voice stuff, but it's a new paradigm.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Clippy back in the day, in Microsoft Clippy, where it was, "Are you sure you spelled your name correctly? Can I help you with that?" Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's probably even more difficult. Being from Middle America, Omaha and Nebraska are kind of one of the telemarketing capitals of America because we're kind of famous for having no accent, kind of the most boring dialect possible, so that we don't offend anybody, I guess, with how normalized our voices are. But yourself being from Israel, you have that accent, and I just think of the problem domain of speech recognition, and it kind of overwhelms me from the perspective of algorithms. It's a hard problem to solve, especially with people, so many different voices over the world. So how does annyang do speech recognition? Is there a library it's using? Did you implement it yourself? How's that work?
So annyang is using a speech recognition, which is part of the W3 spec or proposition, or who can keep track of those? They're so complicated. But it uses what's available in the browser. So right now it's in Google Chrome. I think Firefox is working on implementing it soon. But yeah, that's the problem with speech recognition. I mean, most features browser vendors can implement, but this one requires a very sophisticated backend, something that Google obviously has, but a lot of smaller browsers don't really have. So yeah, that is a major issue with annyang. Yeah. It's Chrome only. But I know other browsers are working on that.
So the browser itself actually does the recognition, the speech to text, and it just hands off to the browser, to your JavaScript library, the text, and you take it from there.
Yeah, exactly. So I take care of all those little nuances and all those, like, for example, if you have a speech recognition running in two different windows, it can actually cause Google Chrome to crash. So I take care of. I actually reported this to them, and they fixed it since then. But like, it takes care of issues like that. So it's an interface in a way, a more friendly interface.
I think it would be remiss to just keep saying annyang over and over again, and not mention the namesake. I pulled back up our emails from back in the day, Tal, and the first thing I did when you emailed me was I started criticizing the spelling of your name. So that's just like me to just immediately start bike shedding on something so minuscule as how you spell annyang. Why don't you give us, for those who aren't huge Arrested Development fans, why don't you give the inspiration for the name and maybe your justification for spelling it wrong?
So yeah, annyang is a reference to one of the greatest shows ever made, Arrested Development, where there was a character who, I don't know if it's fair to say he was called Annyang, but that's what everybody called him. Because when he came, the first time he just said Annyang, which means hello, and everyone just assumed that was his name and didn't bother to find out. So yeah, you can say it's spelled a bit differently.
You wouldn't say wrong. You'd say it differently. I like that.
Well, there's no right or wrong way to spell it because it's not English. It's phonetic spelling, which I'm phonetically spelling it wrong, but at least that way it looks less like the word annoying, which is the feedback I got initially. So I went with that. But yeah, I loved our back and forth when I sent this to you a few years ago. You're like very, very obsessed, and the more obsessed you got about it, the better I felt about it.
Well, it's something that, Adam and I, we look at a lot of open source projects, and so we're very cognizant of names, what catches your eye, what doesn't. Sometimes names are offensive, and we try to help people pick a better name, or just ask where names came from. Sometimes it'll be a project that I have no idea whether or not it has merit based on its value proposition, but the name is so spectacular that I just tweeted or included it in Weekly anyways. Because we do judge books by their covers, unfortunately, and with how fast open source moves, you kind of have to. So annyang definitely immediately caught my eye, and I thought, well, that's got to be a reference to REST development. So I went to the REST development wiki, and I saw it spelled differently there, and that's when I had to start giving you some jabs. But
yeah, it
wasn't just a mistake. It was, you actually said, well, it looks like annoying, so I'm going to change the A, and that makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess that's the point. I mean, if I caused you to pause and look it up and check it, then, most things don't even cause you to pause. You just glance over and continue. And you remember it like a few years later, which says something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it didn't hold it back, the wrong spelling. I'll keep using the term wrong because I'm going to stay on my side of that argument, but definitely didn't hold it back. It's been a couple years. I saw, at least on your GitHub, that annyang 2.0 has come out. What's the state of it? Is it done? Do you have future features for it? Tell us those kind of things.
So, like a lot of developers, I have a very short attention span. I get very excited about something and I can build something pretty interesting, like, those whirlwind 48 hours after you get the idea, you can build something that would normally take you a month. I wouldn't say it's done, but it's pretty feature complete. From time to time, people do ask for more things, send pull requests, so I add those. Hopefully, very soon I'll need to worry about other browsers besides Chrome, but it's pretty feature complete and definitely stable. I mean, if it's 2.0 and I'm I use semantic versioning, so it's stable.
You gave me some examples, and you've already given a couple of where it's been used. Any others that come to mind of cool places that this library's gone that you couldn't have imagined?
So actually, I'm gonna answer a different thing, a different question, because I don't know. You know what? I don't know. It seems like this is a real issue with open source, because you develop something and people use it and you don't really know who uses it, how they are using it. And I mean, they don't tell you. There's no way for you. There's no analytics for open source. So that is a real issue that I've thought a lot about how to solve. I don't have anything yet, but it's something that has been on my mind. Going back to your question, there has been a lot of Jarvises, if you remember from Iron Man. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people have built Jarvises, or Jarvi would be the plural. I'm not sure. So a lot of people have, that was the go-to project. Most people, really the first thing that pops to most people's minds. But that is definitely an interesting problem to solve, discoverability.
Yeah, it might be interesting to have some sort of built, similar to how a lot of websites for nerds like us will have, will respond to keyboard shortcuts. And if you hit, question mark, it'll pop up a heads up display type of a look. It just says, these are the kind of keyboard shortcuts that we support. Thank you, Jared, for being an idiot. The kind of keyboard shortcuts that we support. You could have some sort of an interface for annyang as well, which when you include it, allows you to pop up something that says like these specific voice commands are supported. Even that would need to be discoverable. So, most people don't know you can hit question mark and get those things, but your power users do. That might be a step in the right direction. It definitely doesn't solve the problem altogether, but it would at least allow kind of a common way of people saying, here are the types of voice commands this website supports.
Yeah, I mean, that is something I leave to the developer who uses Annyang, but definitely on the Annyang site itself, that's how I introduce it. I mean, you land on the site, there's like barely 2 sentences, and then it's just telling you, say hello, and you say hello, and the site says Annyang back, or it says show me cute kittens, and it shows you kittens, or then it says like ask for anything, and the site responds. So it's like a soft intro, and then sometimes it's just fun to discover.
Very cool. Well, I think this is a good chance for us to step back and hear from one of our awesome sponsors. On the other side of the break, we're going to move on to your newest open source project, UpUp. So stay tuned for that.
Our friends at TopTal launched a scholarship program for female developers to support aspiring female computer scientists, developers, and software engineers to help achieve their goals through financial support and also mentorship. Each scholarship winner will receive a $5,000 scholarship that can be used towards education and professional development goals. You can spend this money on anything you want, from coding boot camps to online programming courses, textbooks, you name it. You also get one-on-one mentoring, an entire year of weekly one-on-one mentoring with a TopTal senior developer, and this person is going to help you with topics like project guidance, choosing an academic or career path, and also preparing for interviews. Head to toptal.com/scholarships to learn more and also to apply.
All right, we are back with Tal Ater talking about a few awesome open source projects, the most recent of which is called UpUp, and you can find that at upup.rocks, making use of those awesome and or not awesome new domain names there. UpUp is a tiny script that makes sure your site's always there for your users, the offline first library. Why don't you give us the elevator pitch here?
Okay, so basically the last big thing was mobile first. We're building sites that are ready to always be there for users when you're on your phone or wherever. But now that we're all on our phones, we can't really rely on having a constant connection. No one's walking around with a wire connecting them. So new technologies have come out to allow sites to still work even while the user is losing connectivity. And that is what UpUp does. It uses the new service worker APIs to achieve that. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But basically, this is something that happens all the time. Usually when I tell people about this problem and they're thinking, in the less developed world, they don't have connectivity all the time. But I've been visiting the States for the past 2 months, and in downtown San Francisco, I couldn't get a service. And this is something that happens all the time. Whether you're in San Francisco or going down the elevator or on a flight, you can't really rely on having that persistent connection to the internet all the time. So basically what UpUp does is allows the site developer to decide what experience he wants the user to see when he's not connected. So that can be as simple as, if I go to a certain site and I don't have internet, I might see a message from the site saying you don't have a connection, so you can't read your emails, come back later. Or it can be a full single page application experience. You could have Gmail working even without a connection if they implement this. And of course, this requires the user to visit the site while he's online the first time, but once he did, every time he visits it again and he's offline, it'll still work. So the classic example for me would be a site like booking.com. So I know I'm flying to San Francisco. I booked a number of hotels. I landed in San Francisco. I still don't have a local data plan or the connection didn't work, I sit in a cab, open up my phone, go on booking.com, and instead of seeing that little chrome dinosaur telling me I'm offline, I would still be able to see my reservations, to see the address of my hotel, the phone numbers, etc.
Yeah.
And that's the idea behind UpUp and the technology that enables its service worker.
This is an interesting conversation around connectivity in general. I tend to live in a little bit of a bubble where I don't know if I'm ever not online. Of course, airplanes is the big proof point against that. And now they're adding in-flight Wi-Fi. People are can get online on airplanes. It's limited, but gonna be coming. Obviously, in third world countries, places where there's less infrastructure, we do know that cellular infrastructure is way better than any sort of wired infrastructure has been in those places. And so, maybe it's expensive, but access is there. Maybe it's slow, but there is connectivity. Do you think this is a problem that's going to exist 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Or is the network coming, or is it not coming? What do you think?
I really hope so, but one of my first, as an entrepreneur, one of my first companies was called Wiser, and we were one of the first companies to add Wi-Fi to restaurants and cafes in Tel Aviv. And this was in 2004, and we tried to explain to people, to restaurant owners, why they even need to provide this service. And this was 11 years ago, and we still have that problem. So I think it'll be a few more years before coverage is... Like, I remember back then people were talking about, I think it was called WiMAX, something like that, like Wi-Fi, but like WiMAX routers that would cover entire cities 11 years ago. So I think it'll still be a while before this problem is solved.
I'm with you though, Jared. I don't think I've ever been out without a connection. Like I always have the internet.
I think we're probably just in bubbles. WiMAX, I think, is a bit of a dead technology. I know Sprint was one of the carriers that rolled it out in mass years ago, and they've since switched technology. So I'm not sure if the promise of WiMAX has never really arrived. But yeah, it's hard living in a bubble. It's difficult to empathize with people who aren't in that bubble, and see this for the real problem that it is. And then you have people who experience connectivity problems all the time, who want to just like smash their whatever podcast listening device they're using right now because we're so dumb that we think that this isn't a real problem. It just seems like depends on where you are in life. And you're in a unique perspective because you're traveling the world right now. And so you probably have lots of experiences, recently with am I online or am I offline? Just curious how many of those flights you've taken have had internet access?
Well, mostly domestic flights in the US have Wi-Fi. It still costs a lot. Yeah. And there's no company to expense it to.
Right.
But yeah, it's the past 2 months I've been traveling all over the States. Started in the East Coast, West Coast. Now I'm back in the East, and you see it everywhere. I mean, the US isn't covered yet by all those networks, and with a lot of pressures on them to drop prices, that problem will still happen. Mm-hmm. I mean, even in the US. And I agree, I also live in a bubble. I mean, in Tel Aviv, we call our city the bubble.
Oh, really?
And yeah, you have connectivity wherever you go, and it seems isolated in many ways. If anything, it's like Silicon Valley. Mm-hmm. But the issue of connectivity is a real one for most people.
Well, I think UpUp's interest and success early on has proven that this is a problem that developers want to solve. I think you're over 3,000 stars on GitHub. You were definitely in changelog nightly a few days in a row in the top starred repos sections. I think you were at the top of Product Hunt even. Can you speak about that experience on Product Hunt?
Yeah, so that was very interesting. It was actually at my last day on the at my old company. I went in to basically say goodbye to everyone, and suddenly I got a tweet from Product Hunt that that UpUp is there and has had over 100 votes already, and they do this animated GIF of Oprah like going crazy, and that was so exciting. I didn't even submit it there, but it was super exciting, and I just locked myself in a room and followed it throughout the entire day, talking to people, asking them to share it and look at it. And yeah, at the end of the day, it was the most hunted, I guess is the term, the top product on Product Hunt, which brought in a huge amount of traffic, in the tens of thousands. And yeah, UpUp has grown incredibly, and I think the only metric I have to measure that is in GitHub stars. That's our new currency, I guess, and it has surpassed annyang in a month or two, what took annyang 2 years to achieve. So that was very exciting.
You think it's because of Product Hunt, or you think it's because of simply the library itself?
It's a lot of things. Product Hunt certainly helped. It was also featured on a lot of other places. You guys wrote about it, which also brought in a lot of traffic. But I think a lot of it is what I love to talk about later is simply looking at what you're building at a library, even if it's open source, looking at it as a product that even if you're not selling it for money, you need to grab the user's attention. You need to have him understand immediately why he wants to invest another minute of his time to understand what it is, get him excited, make him want to try it or share it with his friends. And that is something that I think I did a little bit better in UpUp than I did in annyang. Live and learn.
Product Hunt's interesting. It used to be, it started off as simply a place where you post, you saw new software as a service or, try this app. And they've seemed to have expanded their scope quite a bit, even so much so that there's podcasts now, which Adam, you and I just found that out earlier this week, I think, when I said, hey, they have a podcast. Why aren't we on there?
We were on there once before. Somebody on Twitter, I can't recall the name, but I see her all the time. I know her avatar. I just can't think of the name right now. But we were submitted a couple times, so I've known about it, but I didn't think. I guess it was brand new then. It was like about 3 weeks ago, and I never really considered I've never been the one to subscribe to. Oh, I've got to put my thing in this site and then it will become popular. And I just don't like feeding that beast, I guess. But sadly, Product Hunt has done well enough that you have to feed the beast. I don't want to feel like that, but at least products do. My wife just launched a new product at her work, and Product Hunt was a big part of that. They were on the front page of it for a while. They were in the top 5 for the day, and it made a big deal for their adoption.
And it's a great thing. I've become a huge fan of Product Hunt because I'm one of the old geezers of the internet, I guess. And I remember back in the days of Dig and all those stuffs, like the
/dot Dig,
/dot, and Today Hacker News, Reddit, all those things. Like those places are very communities that make you feel excluded in a way. They're full of trolls, and Product Hunt just feels like a great place to be. I mean, it started when I discovered that UpUp was featured there. I got a tweet from the founder, from Ryan Hoover. We started tweeting back and forth, and he was super nice. Like when your product gets features, they send you funny animated GIFs, and you can see the responses of the community there. They're all so supportive and interested and asking constructive questions and trying to understand my story and stuff like that. Whereas in other places, it just seems like you're feeding the trolls in a way. So it just feels different.
I think some of that's you can attribute to the community itself, and then you can also attribute some of it to the size and the relative, youth of the site. as things get bigger and as communities grow and as the stakes rise, which Product Hunt's stakes are rising, meaning it becomes more and more valuable to be featured there prominently, it'll be very difficult for them, and it'll be one of their main goals, I'm sure, is to maintain that positive community and not have it turn into a toxic one. And so it's possible that they're still in that stage where it's all kumbaya style, and hopefully they can maintain that. I think that'll be a challenge for them.
So now you're the grumpy old
Well,
man.
I mean, success brings with it all sorts of troubles.
I agree with
right?
you completely.
I was an early Hacker News user and like actual commenter and stuff, and it felt very much like that. It felt like, you know, people were smart, they were helpful, they were insightful. It was generally a place where you would learn and be uplifted and find new technologies. And I know it's kind of a recurring thing that happens with online communities is over time, like the difficulties to maintain that you know, that early feeling as more and more people, and still be able to grow. I think it's just a really hard problem to solve.
Well, let's get back to the topic at hand, UpUp. Tal, what's behind this thing?
Honestly, it does amazing things. Like it's really awesome, but this is all because of the technology that is under it, which I didn't develop. Service workers, and in my opinion, service workers are like one of the biggest additions to the browser we've seen since, I don't know, Ajax and Web 2.0, and it's amazing. Just for people who still haven't played with it yet, basically service workers are scripts that sit between the user's, the browser window and the server. It's a script that runs in the browser, independent of the window, independent of the DOM, and one of the things it can do, it can act as sort of a proxy that you can program. It can sit there and intercept every single request that comes out of the window before it reaches the server, and decide whether to do something about it, change it, call the server, call a different asset, and then return the response if it chooses. All within, of course, like this sounds like a very big security issue, but there's like, this has been thought through, and I've tried to break it, and it's built very well. But what this allows is things like UpUp, for example, but also imagine a site that asks for HTML from the server, and then the service worker detects that it's installed and says, okay, stop, don't ask for HTML, ask for JSON instead, calls for a JSON file, and runs the templating inside the browser before it even reaches the window, and returns back HTML. So it has a lot of power and a lot of possibilities. It can do amazing things. It can talk to the windows even when the windows are closed. It has the ability for push notifications. Basically, this is like one of the things that are pushing web pages as close as they've ever been to the power of applications. It's really spectacular. The guys behind it have been doing an amazing, incredible job.
Let's dive deeper on Service Worker. We're going to take a quick break, hear from a sponsor. On the other side, I got some questions about it because I agree. I think that has huge potential, and it seems like it's shrouded in mystery. You've given a good description there, but we'll do some Q&A on Service Worker when we get back.
Braintree is all about making developer lives simpler with code for easy online payments. If you're searching for a simple payment solution, check out Braintree. For mobile app developers out there, the Braintree V.0 SDK makes it easy to offer multiple payment types. Start accepting PayPal, Apple Pay, Bitcoin, Venmo, traditional credit cards, and whatever's next, all with a single integration. Enjoy simple, secure payments that you can integrate in minutes, and developers, they've got you. Don't worry about taking days to integrate your payments. With Braintree, it's done in minutes, and if you don't have time, give them a call and they'll handle the integration for you and walk you through it. Braintree supports Android, iOS, and JavaScript clients. They have SDKs in 7 languages: .NET, Node.js, Java, Perl, PHP, Python, and Ruby, and their documentation is comprehensive and it's easy to follow. To learn more and for your first $50,000 in transactions fee-free, go to BraintreePayments.com/changelog.
So we are talking about UpUp, which smooths over and adds some things to service workers. Tal, you gave us a rundown of what service workers are. A few questions. Let's start with browser support. Who's implemented this and who hasn't?
So service workers, and I'm Googling it so I don't
I threw you a curveball, didn't I?
Don't mistake any of them. But basically, they just landed in Firefox. They've been in Chrome, Opera. The only ones who aren't part of the party yet are Explorer, the new Explorer, and Safari. And I've actually spoken with some of the guys at the team there, and they're looking into it, and it's on their roadmap. They actually wrote this on their roadmap plan that service workers, it looks like everyone is requesting this and thinks they need it, so it looks like we'll add it. But it might take a while before it lands in Safari, which unfortunately means no iPhone for now. But Chrome, Opera, and Firefox for now.
And I've heard it described as allowing you to man in the middle yourself. Do you think that's an apt description of what service workers do?
Yeah, it's an interesting way to think of it. Yeah, it's kind of like a proxy server. It's basically like, it sounds like man in the middle, and what I described, it sounds very dangerous. But basically, whatever JavaScript can do in the browser window, you're just taking it one level up, and it has the same permissions. It can access the same kind of resources. Only you can do it where it's a bit more powerful, and you can control the experience a bit more.
Is it tied to the particular tab or window?
No, so it's attached to a certain scope. So, for example, talater.com/upup, you can have a service worker that is attached to every window that is under that directory in that domain, or any window that is in that domain. Kind of like
cookies. Similar to cookies? Cookies,
yeah, a little bit, you can say. So it can control any request that is within that scope. That's how it stays secure.
So I like thinking of it like a proxy. We're used to server-side proxies or even browser proxies. And here you have, basically it's like you have a proxy inside the browser window that you can tell it what to do before it delivers the content to your application or in the other direction. Maybe we know what UpUp does. It allows you to have offline web apps. Maybe describe to us how UpUp uses service workers to get that done.
Yeah. Okay. So what UpUp does is it sits above it registers a service worker that sits above the window and intercepts every request that goes, whether the user is asking for the HTML, images, etc. And it catches that request forward. It's doesn't touch it, let it go to the server, but it traps it in a promise. And if that promise is broken, that means the server couldn't be reached, whether no internet or even the server is down. Then that's when UpUp springs into action and says, okay, there's a problem. Let's see if I have something in the cache to show instead. It looks for alternate content in the cache and returns that. So what the user is seeing will be instantaneous. Like, the user would go to a certain site and he would immediately get the offline content. But in the background, it's trying to reach the server, seeing that it fails, and showing you alternate content. So the offline experience is actually faster than the online experience in that way.
Man, I guess I'm just pedantic about naming, but service worker. Like, what does that mean? What does that mean to anybody? It reminds me of web workers. Can you tell us if there's any relation to web workers at all with service workers?
Yeah, so I haven't played around much with web workers, but as far as I understand, it's similar in a way that it is a script that runs in a
Background thread or something.
in the background, yeah, in your browser. So I guess that was the source of the name.
I see. So one's for web and one's for service. Still somewhat confounding. Perhaps service worker, the name is one of the reasons why people struggle so much to, embrace it and really know what it's used for. And maybe it's because it's just generally useful, but doesn't have specific uses beyond just caching, where people can really latch onto it. I like what you do with your libraries. You seem to kind of take, the cookies down to the bottom shelf, so to speak. You did that with annyang. You said, let's make this speech recognition available to more people. Here you're saying, let's make this specific feature of service workers, which is offline availability, easier for people to implement. What were some of the challenges that you ran into with regard to service workers implementation wise with UpUp that you can share with us?
So just understanding how all of this works and fits together is like promises. They work differently than how we're used to doing JavaScript. Accessing the new caching API that is part of service workers is difficult. There's been a lot of things that I'm still learning, or more correctly, I'm forgetting and relearning. But it's not that easy to get into. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can achieve immediately, but if you're looking for a more sophisticated use case, there's some reading required, some learning. There's a learning curve there for sure.
How about the learning curve with UpUp? Have you found people that need to look under the covers and, figure out how it's working underneath, or has it been a pretty good abstraction layer?
No, so actually the only people who commented on the under the covers, as you say, like on the code of it, were people who have been personally involved with the service worker spec and other developers who have been building other service worker libraries. They've been looking under the covers and giving some awesome feedback, which improved the library. But I think it targets the developer who just wants to build something and have it work without having to worry about service workers and stuff like that. There are a few problems there with the learning curve of UpUp, in that you need to realize that it can only control a certain scope. So if you're placing the UpUp JavaScript file inside the JavaScript folder, it will only be able to control what's in there. So you have to place it in the root. You have to... Another limitation of service workers is your server has to be secure, so it only works over HTTPS. But it's built as a progressive enhancement, so if the user's browser doesn't support it, nothing will happen. It'll just see a normal site. It won't even load the script file, so it doesn't affect its performance.
Did you have to actually build that progressive enhancement into UpUp, or is that how service workers are generally? Maybe better put, can I shoot myself in the foot with service workers, or do they also just fail gracefully?
No, they behave. They've been written based on a lot of experience with other technologies that have come before that, and the guys who've written all of this, which I'll gladly talk about later, they really made sure these things work. And if the first thing it does is it tries to register a service worker, and if it doesn't succeed, then it doesn't do anything, so it doesn't affect you. With annyang, I did have to do some things to make sure it loads the minimum amount of code before, because it's only Chrome, so I had to make sure I check as early as possible for support, and if the support isn't there, don't do anything, so as not to affect users who use unsupported browsers.
So you mentioned that a service worker has to be registered. So what is the process of actually registering a service worker back to, I guess, does it install something to the client? What's the process of registering?
So yeah, this is service workers, what I'm talking right now in general, not UpUp specific.
Is it different for UpUp then, or is it Did you have to do some hurdles for UpUp to work?
A tiny bit. What service workers do is when the user first visits the site, it does a register. I forget the name of the command, but it registers a service worker, which then runs the service worker script in the background, and that has an installation process with then shoots an event once it is installed. So that means that usually when you first use the arrive at the site and the service worker is registering and installing, it isn't available for the site until you refresh and then find that it's already registered. I kind of did some hacks around that in UpUp to make sure it can communicate to the service worker which content you want cached and save that during the first view of the page. This has since become a little bit easier. This was a bit more, it required a little bit of hacking in Chrome 42, I think, but it's much easier now. So there's an installation process and then it's ready and you can do things. And that installation process is a great time to cache content, to download stuff. That's what it's there for.
So while you're doing the installation, you can, take the payload and also drop in some. For example, what would you cache?
So what I do with UpUp, which is one example, is when you run it for the first time, you tell him, I want you to cache this HTML and show this for the user the next time he doesn't have a connection. So you cache that HTML,
okay.
and you can also cache additional assets with it, like a image file, CSS, MP4s, even like anything, video. It can look like a full web experience even when it's offline.
I guess from a user's perspective, I'm thinking of, right now users don't really know it's available. So not so much us, like people who are geeks building technology, but users who, aren't even sure what HTTP means or just, anything in particular about how technology works. They're not expecting these applications to not work offline. So how does, I guess maybe this is more experiential than it is technological. What do you think's happening around educating users that offline is an opportunity, or application developers educating their users that, hey, while our application might require a lot of online interaction normally, there are some things you could do offline and to take advantage of it?
So yeah, as you said, like it should be a part of the experience. I don't want to educate. I don't want users to need to be educated what to do differently when it's offline. It should just work, and only when it doesn't work and you get that little dinosaur in Chrome or a message in another browser do you realize that something stopped working. And I'm looking forward to a web where that doesn't happen. Like maybe you'll get a slightly different experience. Like for example, The Guardian just implemented service workers. So if you're going on The Guardian site and you don't have a connection, you get a little crossword puzzle that you can do. It's
something interesting, something trivial.
Yeah, I mean, you'll notice that it's offline. It's but another thing they can do is, like, for example, still let you read the last 10 articles even when you're offline. Like, right. Just save the text of the articles, a template, and show that to the user. It's all possible. The user doesn't even have to notice he's offline to a certain limit.
Yeah, because there's certain things that, if you think that you're online, and take your booking situation, for instance, where you can look at your hotel information, you shouldn't have to be online. You already have that information in your phone, right? It should be displayed when you come back to that web page. But say you want to change it, or once you get out of read-only mode, if you're offline and, there's no indication to the user that they're offline, it's just acting as if they aren't, they could create some confusion. Are there ways in UpUp where you can trigger certain things based on the online status, or is that just something that you can do natively with the browser?
Not yet, but that is definitely something I'm very interested in, allowing you to cache certain actions and queue them in a way so that they can be done once you're offline, you're online again.
Back online.
That is definitely where I want to do next with UpUp.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where offline gets really tricky, is like queuing up, changes, because now
reliably.
Yeah, I changed my booking time, and now the browser can't actually, load that up to the server, and then maybe 5 minutes later I get back online, and that, that API call gets rejected for one reason or the other. You start to get into all sorts of issues. I think a great middle ground in the meantime is like, what can you provide? Like start thinking of it like that. We can put you in a read-only mode. I don't think it's death, telling the person that they're offline and yet showing them as much information as possible. People have that understanding. So indicators, I think, are valuable. I think that crossword puzzle is kind of a fun idea, where, instead of dealing with all the problems of what happens with these requests as they're queued up, and, certain ones are dependent on others being successful, and then seeing that all resolved when the user comes online, which is technically, can be quite a cesspool. Having this like middle ground between like your Chrome dinosaur and a fully functioning app.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's super important. But that is something that is right now left to each side to implement.
Sure.
Yeah.
What about so you basically tell UpUp to start on this page, and you tell it which content you want to cache when they come offline. Like you said, you can pass it HTML or images, these kinds of things. Are there any limitations or incompatibilities with certain CSS frameworks or JavaScript libraries or frameworks that you found?
No, not so far, because basically, because it doesn't sit within the browser window, it sits in a layer above. It's returned to the browser as if it's a network, as if it's a response from the network. It just works the same. As long as, of course, it doesn't call for resources which aren't available, like JavaScript from a CDN or something like that. So you have to make sure all those resources can be cached and made available when you are offline.
You mentioned before that that you tried to break it, which made me believe that you may also try to think about evil ways you can use this service worker opportunity. Is there anything that you can think of that might be an evil possibility, so to speak, for this to play a part?
No, I had some ideas, and I tried to do that. I tried to see if you can return stuff from to bypass the existing security mechanisms, but it's pretty well written. And this is just something like that I like doing. I did it before in speech recognition. I've found a number of bugs which I reported to Google, and most of them they fixed. A few of them they didn't. But yeah, it's fun to break things. I mean, people who make stuff also like to break stuff.
That is true.
Well, anything else on UpUp that you want to say specifically to the technology and how it works before we move on to talk about your product thinking and your promotion of your open source projects?
I think that is the point of the way I work with it, to make these things invisible. But service workers are definitely something people should be looking into. People who are interested. It's definitely fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and if you are interested in service workers, seeing a real-world in-use application of them, such as what's inside of UpUp, is probably a decent way of wetting your teeth. Wetting your teeth. I'm doing it left and right here, guys. Wetting your appetite, cutting your teeth. Just mixing metaphors. Let's take a break before I shoot myself in the foot again, and hear one last time from one of our awesome sponsors. And we want to talk to you on the other side of the break about this promotion idea, how you're treating your open source projects as products, and how you are getting them out there en masse. So we will talk about that on the other side of the break.
Guess what, everyone? Upbeat is announcing their Node.js beta right here, right now, exclusively to our listeners. Upbeat combines performance metrics, release tracking, and error logging into a single simple service. And with all of your data in the same place, they're able to do smart things with it and help you make wiser choices. UpUp integrates with your code base through Git and makes monitoring and debugging your production apps much faster. It's free for an unlimited number of users, and until now has only been available for Django and Flask. But now they're launching a private beta for Node.js and sharing it with our listeners first. So go check it out and sign up for the beta. Head to upbeat.com/changelog. That's OPBEAT.com/changelog. All right, we're back from the break. Tal, it's been fun. Annyang, UpUp, a lot of fun, a lot of enthusiasm behind your pursuit of software, technology, open source. But you have a pretty good heart for promoting open source. You've done a pretty good job with these last two releases of yours. It seems like it's almost easier for you to have some success with your projects. Do you have secret sauce you can share? What are you doing well? What are you doing that's making these projects so great?
So I think and I'm making air quotes now, the secret is I was an entrepreneur for many years, freelancing, working, basically building things from A to Z and having to wear all the different hats, whether it's marketing, development, planning, all of that. So that is something that I think a lot of developers sometimes don't do, because I know I worked in a company, and there's product people, and there's marketing people, and there's development, and sometimes it's very comfortable not to do those other things, but once you get a little bit of experience trying those other things.
I think I know what you're saying, though. I mean, I'm thinking like people get comfortable with their title or their job or the one thing they do. And, because I'm a developer, I'm just a hypothetical here. Because I'm a developer, I can't write marketing copy, or I can't help the marketing team say what our product does better than they can, because that's their job. I can't do their job. But in the case of you, because of your past experience as an entrepreneur and, kind of wearing many hats, it's easy for you to wear many hats, and it's something you actually do well and thrive on.
Yeah, and like we do it a certain way at our work, and once we go into open source and we're in charge of wearing all the different hats, it's a totally different issue. I found that there's like a tension between two opposing forces when you're developing, because on the one hand it's a very private, intimate experience. I mean, you're developing something that you're passionate about. You're sitting probably in the dark with headphones, and I'm describing myself here, and writing code like drinking Red Bulls, and like it's very, very personal, very intimate, and you're right. Like so familiar with the code, and then you want to release it, and you expect other people to be as excited about it as you are. But that is where the other force comes, because other people didn't experience it as you have, so you have to distance yourself from it a little bit and understand how other people see it and look at it with fresh eyes. And that is something that I find is usually in in the projects I've built, it takes up 90% of the time. So you build something like Annyang or UpUp, and then you work on creating copy and a brand around this. Like, it's a scary word, like brand and marketing and PR. It's something we're not used to doing, but it's just as important, because I mean, how many times have you seen like people who've released a library, and you go and it's like there's a readme, and sometimes it's documented or not, but there's like 1 star, 2 stars, and those are there's often like amazing libraries, but you need to go past that moment and realize that you need to look at the whole picture and turn it into a product and market it and make sure people want to find out about it and want to try it. And that is the biggest challenge for people like us, I think.
Something Jared said earlier, which was, we judge books often by their covers more often, and I think that was more in reference to us seeing so much software and so much open source that a name matters. A misspelling might matter. A collision with another library in a different language matters. What can you share about, let's say, like the lessons learned from Annyang to UpUp? Like, what did you learn from Annyang that made UpUp even better in terms of releasing?
So all this, I guess, is a matter of time passing, because I know me personally, every time whether you write code or you design something or you do, like, fast forward 6 months later and you hate it. So maybe this will be the story of UpUp soon. But I think what I did was a better job at explaining what it does, so you immediately, like, it clicks and you immediately get it, and also to provide a hook right up front, that the minute you land on the website you're, like, intrigued and want to find out more about it. I read an article by one of I think the head product guy at Foursquare and Swarm, and he says there's a phrase they use a lot there of surprising and delighting users. Mm-hmm. So that is something I'm really looking forward to. That is the hook that catches the person who comes to a site and has like 20 tabs open. You need to catch him in those first 10 seconds and make him remember the name and want to actually read what you do before he switches to the next one. And so that can be something playful, like the name of Annyang, or that you just start playing with it and it shows you pictures of kittens or whatever you ask it, and like there's other references there, like it's showing TPS reports and stuff like that. In UpUp, for example, that was like a big discussion I had in my head about how to do this. When you get to the homepage, there's a video on the top of it that doesn't look like a video. It just looks like an IDE where there's some code and a phone right next to it, and it looks like an image. And as the user scrolls down, it starts playing, and there's no controls. It doesn't look like a video. It just looks like a live coding, and people are like, I've seen people react to it and they're like trying to play, and then when they're like realizing that it's a video, they're like, oh, yeah. They're like surprised. And that wasn't the safe choice to do there, because about, I don't know, I think 20% of people I've showed to have missed that video. And they were like, oh, there's a video there, when I told them later, and you should have a play button so we don't miss it. But it was worth it for me to miss a couple of people for that reaction from the other 80% who were like surprised by it, and they were like, oh. And the reactions have been amazing. Like, people have tweeted about it and tweeted how awesome it is, and that's how you catch people, like in those 10 seconds.
I love it. It's like an instant demo, honestly, and it's a passive way too, because you might think, well, yeah, I should go to the demos section of your website and I should click a video button or something like that but that's an explicit way of doing it, where you are sort of catching them off guard and surprising them in a way, and maybe even delighting them that, like, hey, right here, real time, in about less than 30 seconds, I can take this example website from an online to an offline version, and you actually see how easy it is to write the different scripts in there and include the UpUp script, and go through the different functions and whatnot to get to this point. I think that's really awesome to do that, and even to take the risk. Like, was that totally your idea, or did your wife help you? Did you have some secret party say, hey, you should try this?
No, that was my idea, but it's not some stroke of inspiration. Like, this was a painstaking process over months. Like, I built something and I've worked months to have a website that I can feel comfortable with releasing, polishing and changing and over polishing it and showing it to a lot of people. It's a painful process.
What drives it all? What's your MO? Why all the time? Why all the effort?
Because when you build something like that and you're so passionate about it, the payoff, the that dance that I later do when I find someone doing something is from people actually not just glancing over it and going to the next thing, but actually being caught in it and understanding what it is and getting excited. So that is the most important part of like polishing that. To have that experience from the user is the most important part in my for me, to get that payoff, to get people to use it, to get people sharing it and building awesome stuff with it.
So what are all the different parts that go into thinking about an open source project like a product? You can use UpUp as an example. You've obviously stated that the name of the project matters, that the landing page. Are there other aspects to it that you put so much thought into as those things?
So a few other things are, of course, the name. I won't say I'm 100% happy with the name UpUp. I'm happier with annyang because it's a bit weirder. But you have to consider how people, once they get excited, you have to give them an action to do next. So you have to consider how they're going to share it, and when they share it, how that is going to translate into more people being excited about it. You have to consider how you approach other coders or bloggers or developers, media. You have to consider all of that. You have to consider how people in different countries are gonna perceive what you've built. For example, annyang, which uses a language which I don't understand, so you need to be careful with that. But hey, it's not even a real word.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of thinking that goes, and obsessing that goes behind this. Yeah. It's a labor of love.
Earlier on, we talked about you ending up on Product Hunt. You emailed us, that you have a new project. You're okay with promoting your projects, and you stated why. And Adam and I even revealed some of our thoughts around like how do we feel about promoting the changelog on these different venues and stuff. I think developers kind of have a icky factor when it comes to self-promotion or marketing. I know that's like considered a bad word. Do you ever feel icky with any of the stuff that you do to get your projects out there? Do you ever feel like you've crossed a line, or is it all just par for the course?
No, because I don't think the icky experiences I've had were with marketers who didn't believe in the product, who didn't like, when it's someone who's a developer and he truly believes in it and he talks about it with passion because he truly loves what he does. I love it. Like I love watching people do screencasts and talks about their technology because you get caught up in that excitement. It's not marketing. It's just talking about what you love.
It's not marketing. It's just talking about what you love. I like that.
That's good.
Was that a marketing slogan? What I just
That sounds like a good slogan.
That might have been it. Yeah.
I'll write that down.
Well, we have a couple closing questions we obviously love to ask our guests. And we got a super secret one. I think you got something coming up that you might be able to talk about. So maybe we'll open with that super secret one first. What do you think, Jared?
I think so. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So, Tal, is there anything super secret that you might be doing in the near future to promote open source? Something no one else knows about?
Okay, so I'm actually right now obsessing about my latest labor of love. As you can see, like I'm super excited about these other aspects of open source that people usually don't talk enough about, I think. Like you guys do on the changelog, and that's why I enjoy it a lot, because there's a lot that goes into open source that has nothing to do with the code, and there's not enough places that talk about it. So one of the things I've been working on is a new blog, a new site called theopensourcer.com. where I'm going to be talking about everything that has to do with open source and nothing with the code. Yesterday I was like thinking of slogans for that, and I was like, Beyond Code, that's a good one. And then I was, wait, there's an issue with that. Like, I couldn't remember why. It took me a second. Where did I hear that before?
It's a good name, right?
Yeah, it's a great name. So the idea is, to talk about all those things which are usually icky for us as developers, and turn them into something that you can approach. And so it's issues like, once you release an open source library, what do you need to do to make sure people get it, to make sure people instantly understand it, how they can use it, what can you do to build a community around this, how can you market this, how can you approach other bloggers or tweet about it. So the product thinking behind open source, all those issues which I think are underrepresented in open source right now, which is a shame because there's so much good stuff out there, like so many libraries that we never even hear about.
Well, trust us, we feel the pain. Jared and I wish that we can do daily podcasts. Well, maybe not daily podcasts, but more often than 4 times a month. I mean, I feel like every time we turn around, Jared, we're approaching something more interesting, something new in a new language. And we just, we're always striving to keep up ourselves. And so any more help in the area of covering open source is always good.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much awesome out there.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you kind of teased when we asked you about, I think Jared said something to sustainability and mentioned your wife and the travel that you've been doing and whatnot and being newly married. How does sustainability play into annyang, UpUp, and ultimately the open sourcer?
Obviously, if I quit my job, I decided I want to do open source full time. I have to be able to support myself somehow. So that is something I'm looking into right now. One of the ideas is an inspiration for me has been actually your shows with Mike Parham from Sidekick, who built Sidekick as a open source project and has turned it into a business by continuing to develop the open source version while developing versions for the enterprise. And he's been thriving doing that, and it's very inspiring to me. Actually, I just interviewed him for the open sourcer. He's a very interesting developer. Yeah. So one of the ideas is to create a version of UpUp that is even easier to use and is available to non-developers. So WordPress users are my main target right now. So if you have a WordPress site, even just including a script and adding 2 lines of code, sometimes you're uncomfortable with that, and there's like issues to consider, and you have to move maybe your JavaScript from a CDN and host it locally. And so I'm building something that will do all of that automatically, and that is a service that I believe people are going to be willing to pay, a product that people are going to be willing to pay for. If you're a hotel and you want people visiting your site to be able to access your address, your details, even when they don't have connections, it's worth it. So continuing to develop the open source projects I've been doing so far while considering other commercial aspects for them. But of course, all of that gets funneled back to developing the open source more, just like Mike is doing with Sidekick. And of course, hopefully one day the open source is going to be doing well. Maybe they'll be a part of it. And maybe I'll also need to do some consulting in the meantime. I'm open to that. But the end goal is to build an open source empire.
You heard it here first, everybody.
We will definitely link up the opensourcer.com in our show notes. You can find those at changelog.com/183. And the last question we have for you here is the old saw. Who's your programming hero? But I'm going to just loosen the constraints a little bit since you're a product guy and say you can pick a programming hero or a product hero if you have somebody who has inspired you in your product thinking. So what you got?
So my hero these days is Jake Archibald. He's a developer advocate on the Chrome team. He's also one of the people who wrote the service worker specification. Actually, I got the idea for UpUp when I watched him speak at Google I/O a year ago. He's obviously a great developer and has done so much great work, but the thing that I find amazing is his ability to use humor to explain things. And I found myself like sitting in a cafe with headphones, listening to one of his videos explaining how to use service workers and simply laughing out loud, and people are looking at me. Like his ability to coin phrases and to draw comparison between bad connections and a one-legged dog who is trying with all his might to fetch something, but all his enthusiasm doesn't work. Like his ability to use humor to explain things is remarkable, and it's inspiring. So definitely, like, if you have some time, check out a few of his videos on YouTube.
Very cool. Well, it's Tal, it's definitely been a pleasure having you on to learn about your passion behind software development, and you're all in on open source and the work you've done on annyang and UpUp, and coming on here and sharing that with the open source community is really great. Look forward to the work you're doing with the open sourcer one, and we'll obviously be here to help you however we could possibly help you. Any other closing thoughts before we close out the show on your side?
No, I mean, thank you. Thanks for all, the changelog has really been an inspiration for a lot of this, for talking about things that are not just code specific. I mean, I listen to other podcasts which are like language specific, but talking about the bigger picture, issues that affect all of us. That is something that has inspired me to do that.
Very cool.
So thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you for listening. And to those who are actually listening to this show, not just here on these mics talking, thank you for listening. To those members out there that support us, we definitely thank you. We have 4 awesome sponsors: CodeShip, TopTal, Braintree, and OpBeat, supporting this here particular show. But fellas, it's time to say goodbye, so let's do it.
Goodbye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.